want to welcome everyone back to the Transferable Everything podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Schulteis, and my co-host, James Keating. This week, we're going to be talking about grit and resilience. And we're going to continue with our tradition from last week. And I'm going to start this off by reading a summary of the chapter on grit from my upcoming book, Transferable Everything. So let's get into it. To the level of grit as well. And there's a connection there. And it felt like you were sort of touching on that.
Yeah. And to segue a little bit is that when you have that program and you have something to aspire towards and it's mapped, you know it's something that can be realized. For weightlifting, we also have the all-known ego lift or ego lifter. Why does an individual do that? If you have a program that you know is going to work, you follow that program to a T. Sure, there are going to be setbacks for whatever reason. Maybe your diet's not locked in, hydration's off, you slept poorly, you're overworked, under-recovered, yada, yada, yada. You have to diagnose and figure out what those things are and correct. But an ego lift is something that comes from within. You choose to deviate from the plan. It's self-sabotage. If I try to max out, that's going to completely trash my nervous system, and then I'm going to set myself back on the program. So there certainly needs to be very, very strong clarity in your goal, and knowing that, checking my ego within this framework can be a gritty thing to do, or is a gritty thing to do. Where I think others could maybe flip that on its head and say, well, I wasn't supposed to lift my max this week or hit a rep max, but I did it because I'm gritty and I had to show the world that I'm strong enough or prove it. Like, do you need to prove it to yourself?
Right.
Is it not better to prove to yourself that you know what your goal is and you can stick to doing what you have to do to get there? Just a matter of forks in the road. There's always going to be deviations from the path. It's important to recognize that maybe you're on the right path or you're not on the right path as well. All to say, clarity and constant reevaluation is always an important thing.
And I think that brings that entirely full circle. And I think we've talked about this before. That's where some of the value is leaning on friends and family or coaches, mentors, whoever you have in your life that you can utilize to sort of keep you in check, because we all suffer from cognitive dissonance, at some point throughout our lives consistently in different ways. And it can show up as calling forth a virtue, as you described it as, well, I'm going to show the world how gritty I am by lifting this weight. Well, you had committed to this objective and you've broken it without sticking with it. The actual grit was sticking with it,
right?
Not that. That was your ego disguised as grit.
Sure,
your cognitive
dopamine
dissonance.
hit.
Yes, yeah, and so it could be the dopamine hit that your ego is looking for. But I think dopamine can be a little more innocuous as well. It doesn't have to be from that. We were just talking before we started filming about sort of the dopamine hit of, food.
Yeah.
As if you're working on, some sort of meal plan, nutritional reset, diet, whatever you want to call it, that's a really humbling experience and reminder of the grit it takes to actually make the choice not to have that dopamine hit. For me last night, it was pizza. I didn't eat it. That was really tough. I don't want to undersell that.
It's delicious.
I love pizza.
It's there. It's accessible.
Yeah.
Who's going to eat it if I don't?
Yeah. The mouth pleasure is amazing. I do have a little thing to my advantage, but it's something I always forget, and it's amazing how the mind tricks you that way. Is that I don't know if I'm gluten intolerant or what the case is, but if I eat something like pizza, I love it so much. But then my body, my mind.
Yeah, you suffer the consequences.
I do. Yet somehow for so long I've been able to sort of like know that and still do it anyways.
Sure.
Like a robot. And sort of like that lizard brain of wanting that dopamine hit of that mouth pleasure can somehow override my memory that this is going to make you feel like shit. I knew that 6 hours ago when I did the same thing in the morning and had the bread with my scrambled eggs or something. And, you know, it's such a hard thing. And so I don't want to also oversimplify all of the things that we're talking about.
Sure.
Or that, you know, I don't equally fail as much as everyone else does. But it's good to talk about it and put it forth and
it's
think
not
about it.
an easy thing to do.
Right.
It is hard. And to your point near the beginning of the pod is it becomes easier when you can see other people demonstrating that it's possible.
Yeah.
At least for, I'm speaking for myself here.
Sure.
Being able to see others go through it, they're just a human being like me.
Yeah.
It means that there's probably a capacity for myself to be able to achieve the same thing if I lock in. Now, obviously, there are exceptions, and we've spoken about that as well. Like, we can speak to talent or predisposition, genetic advantages, and so forth.
Totally.
But broadly, being able to create a plan and then stick to it to the best of your ability to achieve your goal, I believe is something that the majority of people should or could be able to do.
Yes.
They might need a hand.
Yep.
But there are many hands being offered.
Yeah. So you had brought up capacity. And I don't think it was intended this way. And I didn't touch on this, but it prompted me to think about something. And it's a reminder that there's capacity in strength, and then there's capacity in volume. So if you go back to the deadlifting metaphor, you know, there's some of us that might be able to lift heavier than others, and there's others that might be able to put in more reps.
Right.
Probably the idea is we want to steadily increase our capacity to lift a certain amount of weight and a certain amount of reps. And both of those things. So, you know, we were just talking about food, for example. And I was trying to think back to my experience when I was going through a really long, sustained period of time where, you know, it took every amount of grit and resilience I had. My diet and nutrition was not great. It wasn't horrible. It was not great. And it showed through that period. And sometimes I look back and I'm hard on myself. But then I have to give myself some grace at the same time and remind myself that, well, like, I was deploying every amount of grit I had toward these few goals.
Right.
And so I succeeded in that. The mission was completed. That's great. Nutrition probably had to take a bit of a back seat. And we have to be honest about those things, right? You said this last time, not everything can be priority one, otherwise nothing's a priority.
Right.
And those things were. And I had great strength in my capacity for grit, and I had pretty good volume. But all of it was deployed to those things.
Yeah.
And so if I was to even try to, you know, do anything extreme on the nutritional side, I don't know that I would have been able to. And that's probably what happened. In the moment where it would just be like, I just need to eat that pizza. It's right there in front of me. It's accessible. It's easy. Gives me a little dopamine hit when everything feels like shit right now.
Yeah.
And I think that happens for lots of people as well. And I think the idea, though, is when we think about it and we think about the different seasons that we're in our lives, is, you know, if you're going through a season where it's like deploying every amount of grit you possibly have, you know, hopefully you get through that part of that season, and then you got to redeploy it to the other areas as well.
Right.
You can't just keep that going. So, you know, as you kind of get through that, and it's sometimes you don't even get through it. It just, you start to become accustomed to that weight, and so you can lift more.
Right.
So now, okay, I'm still lifting, you know, 225, and that's not what I want to be lifting every day, but like I can kind of rep that out now. I've got some reps under my belt. And so I can kind of sustain that. Parenting's a little bit like that. It gets sort of like really hard. You kind of figure it out, you build your capacity, all of that, and now you can kind of rep it out.
Yeah.
And then now you can be like, okay, well, like I've kind of figured this out. I have the resilience for this thing, and I have a little bit more in the tank now. So now let me kind of refocus on my nutrition or something to that effect. Anyways, I just want to put forth the idea of capacity in both strength and volume.
Sure. Yeah, there are a few things in there I want to speak to. One of them is, am I training for strength or am I training for endurance or work capacity?
Right.
That's also, and not specific to weightlifting, it could be developing a skill. There's also a determination to be made within that. I guess that's all to say there's nuance. I kind of lost my train of thought there, to be honest.
If you're thinking of like intentionality, you were talking about programming before.
Yeah.
So like where you can, if you can intentionally program strength versus volume and things like that, that's great. Sometimes, there were seasons for me where like it was just like so hard. It wasn't sustained for a long period of time.
Yeah.
But it was really hard. I could see the other end and I just had to get through it. That, to be honest, that was actually a little bit easier than the things that are less hard, but you can't see the end.
Right.
One of the things that that was like, this sounds so simple, but it was actually pretty jarring and eye-opening for me when I joined the military was in training, we'd be going for a run in the morning. And it was my first experience of going for a run with a group of people, but I didn't know where we were going. It was dark, and I didn't know how long we were running for. Those sound like very simple things, but they're actually quite profound.
Sure.
Because, even if you run only 5 kilometers that morning, and you're accustomed to running 10, 15 kilometers, that 5 kilometers feels like a lot.
Sure.
Because you just can't see the other end. So it's less in volume than you're accustomed to. But the notion of not being able to see, the light at the end of the tunnel, that has a huge weight that maybe most of us don't fully understand.
Right. Okay, so I'll use the current example that I'm putting myself through.
Please.
Which is I'm trying to cut weight right now.
Yep.
And it's going really well, but it's tough. It's tough because for a number of reasons, my eating habits prior to doing this were terrible. I'm either on track or off track, and that's just the way it's been because I really enjoy food. I love to cook. I also like training hard and recovering harder, if you catch me.
Yeah, I get you.
But within that, I am eating a very specific way to meet the necessary requirements to lose body fat, but I'm also doing it in a way where I'm eliminating choice.
Right.
I'm being very black and white and deliberate about what I'm doing. But long term, that's not necessarily sustainable.
Right.
There's 2 things where grit might be required within that, which is that I'm putting aside my desire for a thing, which is to gorge myself on delicious food. And then the other is knowing that if I want to sustain the shape that I eventually get to, it's going to mean that I still have to continue through some form of eating that is different to how I have been in the past.
Right.
What I mean by that is I have to change my eating habits. Now, there's a light at the end of the tunnel as far as fat loss is concerned, because I know that I have a certain body composition goal, and when I get there, it's locked in. After that is I'm going to give myself a little more flexibility, but my eating habits still fundamentally need to be different than they were before. And that's where there's no light at the end of the tunnel.
Sure.
It's that, oh, okay, I just have to change. This is one thing that has to be a consistent, otherwise it's going to get away from me. I'm going to put on body fat again. Eventually, I'll have the desire to cut that down, and away she goes.
Yeah.
So there's almost like an anticipation that even though this cut is really hard, and I feel at times I'm suffering through it, it's not going to take as much grit to go through what I'm going right now as it is to maintain a healthier lifestyle afterwards.
Yeah. And that's exactly it. It's like, technically it's harder because you're suffering more by having less. And so, when you go for the run I was describing, when you're running 10 kilometers, you kind of know, right? Like, okay, this is 10 kilometers. I can kind of gauge where I'm at. I can talk through each step along the way,
right.
And it's harder. When you're going for the 5 kilometers that you don't know is 5 kilometers, you don't know where you're going, that's when it gets hard. One of the things they would do, this was, looking back, it's quite funny, is, they would take us for a run, go through the forest and, into some fields, roads, whatever. And then we'd be coming back and we'd be going up the road and we could kind of see where our bunks were, like where, and so you start to assume, okay, this is great. This thing's coming to an end. And sometimes that would be true.
Yeah.
And then other times they would just run us right past.
Oh man.
And that small, seemingly insignificant thing is there's a lesson in that, and understanding yourself and the things that motivate you, the things that help guide you through hard things.
Right.
Because again, it wasn't the distance; it was the not knowing. So that's really interesting. Now, in your experience, going through what you're going through with the diet, there's so many things to consider as you step into that journey. So I'm curious how your mind was working and what you were thinking about. Because as we're talking through it, of course, there's like selecting the right food for you and figuring out, what you can sustain, can't sustain, what the period is. Like all of those sort of things are obviously important.
Yeah.
But, and I don't know how much of this is true for other people. I'm trying to think for myself as well. But for you, did you go in thinking to yourself, okay, this is going to take a lot of grit and resilience. But just as you described, the shorter term one, it's going to be pretty hard.
Sure.
But fine, I can do that. And did you go in with sort of that knowledge that, it's not actually the hardest thing that isn't going to be the food selection and all of those things. The hardest thing is going to be testing my level of grit and resilience towards that end goal and my ability to deploy that as a virtue.
Yeah. Number of things there. I've cut weight before. So a significant weight cut, much, much younger than I am now. Right. But I was at a place where I felt I had to. Not for health reasons back then, because I wasn't thinking about that. It was more vanity. I'd been working out for a long time, and I looked like I hadn't, and I wanted to see what was underneath.
Sure.
So there was already a bit of a database there. I knew what to expect. I knew how hard it was going to feel. And that's why, as I'm doing things now, through that journey, I had learned that choice would very easily derail me from my goal. I've got my macros and my calories mostly dialed in, and I know that if I hit more or less that every day, that I'm going to see things trending downwards. When I have choice, or if I go out to eat, that becomes harder to do. It's kind of like a personal work-life balance if I want to think about dieting as work.
Right.
Because I still need to enjoy my day, or I would like to, and my life broadly. I don't want to say, hey, I'm not going to go out with my friends tonight because of this reason. I still have the goal. Maybe it just means I've pushed that destination out another day or two. But I also need to keep in my mind that if I continue to allow myself to slip, that's how I fall into old patterns and end up not reaching the goal that I want.
Right.
I said that one of the things that I do is I eliminate choice, which is that I more or less eat the same thing every day. And that's because I have it measured, which means I can pretty accurately eyeball things. I mostly measure my protein just to make sure I'm getting the muscle preservation effect. And to be fair, a lot of this, I don't know how grounded it is. It's just like based on my experience. So it requires a bit of grit in that, I really wish I was able to eat a slice of pizza, but I care more about the result that I'm getting, that it doesn't feel as hard as it otherwise might be if I didn't know there was going to be a payoff.
Right.
So I see the goal in the distance and I go, great, I want that a lot. And so what I'm doing right now is a temporary measure to get that. Sure, it's hard. Sure, maybe my brain at times goes, you know what, this isn't really worth it. But then you revisit the goal. And within it, there are a number of things. There's health, like I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah.
I would like to have a better baseline health before I get to a certain age where that becomes a harder thing to do. There's also vanity. Like, it feels nice to look good.
Sure.
There is an element to that. I could probably look to a few other things like wanting to have more athleticism. I've got some friends who boulder and rock climb, and I would love to be able to do that with them more often. But I just felt that I weighed too much compared to what my strength would actually allow me to do.
Right.
Where I went with them a couple months ago, and I torched my wrist so bad with a certain hold that it actually hurt my weightlifting for a couple of weeks.
Right.
And it's just I didn't have the strength to do that. Now, sure, I was probably overreaching on the thing I was trying to do. But a tertiary goal is generally better athleticism, which I feel I will be able to achieve with a lower body fat percentage.
Right.
But yeah, I'm so excited about how things are going to go that I don't feel how things are going, I think.
So you're sort of locked in to the feeling, you're imagining the feeling of what it's going to feel like once you achieve that goal, and you're kind of holding on to that and sort of disguising how it currently feels. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I think it's partly that. The other part of it is that if it feels hard, and at least in this particular thing, I know what I'm doing is working. And so there's some positive reinforcement there also.
Right. Okay, so I have a question about something you brought up.
Okay.
So you said that basically you want the goal that you've set more than the challenges along the way. Sort of it outweighs on the scale.
Sure.
And sort of, you keep your eyes on that. I'll probably often refer back to a saying my mom always reminded us of growing up was keeping your eyes on the light at the end of the tunnel. And sort of that's your light at the end of this dark tunnel, and you're just sort of locked in on that and working towards that.
Sure.
So the darkness around you doesn't matter as much. So what I'm wondering is, you've always been aware of, say the correlation between body fat percentage and athleticism, and you generally, because you've done it once before, you feel better.
Sure.
When you're at a certain composition, and so you're somewhat aware of all of these things in advance. However, you still moved away from it, right? Yet you then had a moment or a build up towards a moment that you said, okay, you know what? I want this thing.
Sure.
How important is that moment? And is there a way to sort of manufacture it, or is it sort of like a pit of despair that you find yourself in at some point that leads to that?
So it was a matter of, first and foremost, the conditions of my life changed a little bit since my initial significant weight cut and now.
Right.
Which was, I've had a number of injuries that have kept me out of the gym or even kept me in a chair, where I've had knee brace, ankle brace, sciatica, etc. So there's some things that did impact my ability to be athletic.
Yeah.
A lot more time in a chair. I work a desk job. I like to play video games. But I wouldn't call it despair.
Okay.
outside of injuries, my goals with training or in the gym also changed. I mentioned at the time I wasn't thinking about health very much.
Yeah.
It is true that you need to be in a caloric surplus to put on muscle and to gain strength. Now, I probably took that a little too far,
We all do.
but
Been there. Dirty bulk.
my goal was to be strong. It was a very stupid goal, but I really enjoy training. It's like a recreational thing for me. I blow off steam, but also you get to set these small goals and you hit them and you feel like you've accomplished something. But I enjoy the practice as much as I enjoy hitting that number.
Yeah.
I like deadlifting. I like bench pressing, all of that stuff. It's fun. And so in my head, I had this running joke with some of my buddies that I was going to be the strongest in my bloodline. And then I actually started taking that seriously because I thought it was really funny. But I was motivated by this really like asinine goal, and my health got away from me considerably. But I got strong.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. And then, I hurt myself again. And I was in a position where I might have gotten close to the goal of achieving a certain level of strength. But now, as I'm recognizing that I'm getting older and maybe my health markers aren't as good as they could be, and I have my doctor saying, hey, buddy, you need to lose some weight. I'm like, yeah, I think I do.
Yeah.
I had joked, and there's always some truth to my jokes, that I wasn't thrilled with the neck volume on camera in the earlier episodes of this podcast, and so that was motivating too. There's still a vanity component, I won't lie, but there's also a blood pressure component, or again, an athleticism component. So it's just a matter of the stakes behind the outcomes of those goals. But I wouldn't call it despair.
Well, what I think, and this is one of the things I think ultimately that we want to get from the podcast, the book, is to sort of, the book is calling these things forward. The podcast is kind of it in a nutshell for you and I. It's not actually just about talking about the things that are in the book or these ideas. It's self-reflection in action. And you just did that perfectly. You self-analyzed so many things. And, I've watched you go through this journey. I've watched you deadlift when you were incredibly strong, which you still are. But, and so I've seen this. And so hearing you talk through it is, I think, a really great example for anyone listening, because I think we need to be a lot more thoughtful about, everything about ourselves, the decisions we make, and so forth. I was actually thinking about this last night. And one of the beautiful parts of being present is we can allow ourselves, and we need to allow ourselves to slow down. It's so we can think about things more deeply. It's far too often, and I'm probably one of the most guilty of this, sort of like gloss through life, moving way too quickly. And it's not just about like slowing down physically or doing less things. It's about taking the time to be more intentional and thoughtful about the things that we are doing. And again, I'm as guilty as anybody with that. And it's a really hard thing to do. And, so you kind of just did that as an example in action. Sure. And I think it's really, really important. And then understanding like, okay, I'm going to commit to this goal. What are the things within me that are going to be called forth?
Right.
In this case, grit being one of them. You're going to have to call forth grit in varied capacities. You got to take the time to think through these things. And, hopefully people listening can find someone in their life where they can kind of do this workshop, this thinking, self-reflection workshop back and forth, and have these types of conversations and have friendships and relationships where you can kind of say, okay, I hear you saying that, but like, is that really true?
Yeah.
I've kind of watched you go through this and sort of pose the questions and create certain levels of accountability. Yeah. I think even within grit, that's necessary. Just like you said earlier, I can't remember this scenario earlier in our conversation, but it was basically about how grit can show up as its own form of cognitive dissonance.
Right.
Oh, it was the deadlifting one. Well, I decided to deviate from the program because I wanted to show the world how gritty I am by lifting the most weight,
Right.
et cetera. So it's all of those things intertwined, and things are so complex and require a lot of us. And thinking about things thoughtfully, being present, sitting with them, considering them, factoring in variables, being honest, all of these things. It's not just white knuckling through the wall.
Right.
It takes grit for some people, myself included. Like, it's hard for me to just sit and be present. I don't do well with that, but it's important. And it takes grit for me to sit and think and be present, to think about the level of grit that I have, and in this weird paradoxical way. And I just wanted to put forth, that it's wonderful to see somebody going through that exercise and demonstrating it for everyone listening.
Sure.
We've been talking a lot about exercise, and I wanted to kind of put this one forward as a workshop as well.
Cool.
It's something I've been thinking a lot about, and I know you love exercise so much, and you played sports growing up, as did I, and I've been thinking about this as a parent now, and my wife and I make intentional exercise a big part of our life. And I know our kids are seeing this play out, because, if we ever have to stay at a hotel somewhere, we still go to the hotel gym. And we're pretty good now at figuring out really good short workouts. And there's nothing for the kids to do if it's just the four of us. So the kids have to sit there and they watch us, and that's okay. We're okay with that. It gives them an opportunity to see. But what it made me think of is hearing a lot of parents talk about, well, my kids play sports, so that's like sufficient exercise for them. They're healthy, they're running, they're playing the sports. And, I'm probably the first person that'll say how important sports are. And I truly believe that. They really are. Because they can teach so many lessons. And there is the health component in all of those things. And I also think there's something about intentional exercise for kids that I don't know if we've fully explored. I'm sure somebody has, but worth talking about. Is there a place to make exercise for the sake of exercise a part of your kid's life? As like, this is what a healthy this is what a healthy life looks like.
Yeah.
Exercising for the sake of it, going for a run, not because your coach told you to, for the soccer team, basketball team, football team, whatever, dry land training for the hockey players, going for a run because going for a run is good for your heart. And that's kind of it. And having a healthy heart is important. So sort of stripping away some of the goals that kind of get tied to it and making it just very intentional for something a little bit different than what I think typically most kids are accustomed to. Anyways, that was a long way to get out.
Sure.
What I was trying to say. I apologize, but no,
anyways. You had me searching for a quote, and I'm trying to find the exact one, and I'm sure it's been translated differently or misattributed. I don't know, but here it is. No man has the right to be an amateur in the matter of physical training. It is a shame for a man to grow old without seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable. It's Socrates.
Socrates, yes. Beautiful.
So I bring that up because I think that humans are incredible. We're capable of incredible things. And for a long period of time, when I was a younger person, I did play sports. But I was nowhere near pushing my body to see what I was capable of.
Right.
Not necessarily sure where to take that, but I've gotten a lot of fulfillment through exercise in those achievements. Thinking prior to, I could never do that, and then realizing, oh yes, I can.
Right.
And I know there are cases as well where people are differently abled and they're not able to exercise in the same way or do those things. But outside of that, I think it's essential on a health level, for a longevity level, and to really own your body and your existence and your capacities.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the beginning stage of extreme ownership. I'm responsible for the health of my heart, so I need to go for a run. It's not just because the coach told me to and because I want to be a better soccer player, hockey player,
Sure.
whatever. It's because I'm responsible for my heart, and so I'm going to take that seriously.
Yeah.
And in addition to that, I think a lot of us have seen over time, there's this like this struggle point for young athletes especially, where, they're no longer playing the sport for whatever the reason might be. And yeah, they've exercised and they've trained because it was part of sport. Now you need to somehow shift to train because you just have to train. Whereas like sort of from the vanity perspective, you might have a certain body composition just as a byproduct of the performance level training you were doing.
Sure.
And now it's sort of can become jarring. I've experienced this where like, well, you're not training in that same way and the byproduct starts to disappear.
Yeah.
Like, wait, what? And that's, I don't think surprising to many people, but that can be like a really, world-changing moment for an athlete who's been this way from, 4 to 18, 20, 23, whatever the age might be.
Yeah.
And of course, our bodies always change over time. But I think that if we have elements of intentional exercise built within our understanding of our responsibility to ourselves and it being necessary, then it's a little bit easier to make each of those lumps because you've sort of removed exercise from being attached to the sport or the performance. Right. And, it is, of course, it has to be part of it. There's no way around that. But it can also be something else. And if you have elements of that, it being that something else, then I think that'll serve you in that longevity part of your life where it sort of can become part of your identity. It's something that I've tried to sort of work into my life over time as I've gone through some of these transitional moments is that, exercise generally is a part of my life. It doesn't matter if I'm on vacation. It doesn't matter if work is crazy. It doesn't matter, what stage I'm in, brand new baby. It doesn't matter. I need to carve out some parts, maybe not as much as I always had, maybe not 7 days a week, maybe not 5, but I can find 3 days, 3 sessions, 4, and hopefully in a new season get back up to where I want it to be. But it's intentionally making it a part of your life, your identity, to the point for me anyways, many of my friends, when they come over, they know they should probably bring their sneakers, especially if it's summertime, probably doing something. Right. And there's some fun within that of building relationships around some of that intentional exercise for, our overall health and well-being and so forth. So anyways, just kind of want to get your thoughts on that.
No, I'm glad you touched on it being a fun thing, because for me, exercise or fitness or strength training, whatever the medium is for me, is not always tied to health or training outcomes either. There's an element of play that I don't get everywhere, but I get it there. There's a playfulness. I have fun while I'm there. I feel good, I feel healthy, and that's one of the things that reinforces me going back. Right. Outside of the other various compounding goals, which is like deliberate training for health, deliberate training for strength, or for any given sport. Right. I would certainly hope it becomes something that becomes cultural.
Yeah.
Mostly from a health standpoint, not even lifespan, in that we all get old. And there's going to come a certain point in time where we no longer have the ability to do the things that we could do, or maybe never did do. And one of my approaches to life generally is that I want to try to experience as many things as I possibly can, because time is a finite resource.
Yes.
So if I can extend the period of time in which I can be able-bodied and do these things that I really enjoy to do, like, absolutely, the younger you start, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I went through a pretty serious injury. And it changed my capacity in my physical training, my running, and all of these things. It took me a long time to fight back to what I can do today. And I went from like one extreme to the other. And it was at a relatively young age, sort of like mid-20s or in around there. And that was pretty eye-opening about, the time and the resource that you have towards the thing you want to pursue. I look back on the period where, I was at the level that I was at in my fitness journey, as in one part, it was a byproduct for my job and for athletics, but also for myself in many ways. But I'm really happy that I put in the effort and the grit application towards that, because once it was taken, I can look back on that time, even though I wish I still had it and all of that kind of stuff. I can be very proud that I had applied what I did during the time that I did have it.
Yeah.
And, we don't really think about that while we have the thing.
Sure.
It's always in hindsight when you've lost something that you've realized how much you valued it. Mm-hmm. And I think that kind of goes back to the presence and thinking about things a little more deeply.
Sure.
To help us understand while we have it, the value that we hold within it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to do that if you don't pause and take a moment. We've talked about so many different components and, parenting, especially child development. And there's an interesting part of this for leaders of businesses, executives, where I find in a lot of conversations, there's sort of like this misplaced value of training. And I think there's like a bit of a grit component here. So from some of the conversations I've had, training, physical training and intentional exercise and all of those things often seems to present as like a distraction. And I think this is where like transferable everything can kind of come full circle, is that it's not necessarily a distraction. Some people will look at it as like, well, an hour of exercise is an hour away from the business. And that hour within the business is of value. And to be totally honest, sometimes, entrepreneurs especially, but executives, their meaning and purpose can be kind of baked into that profession in the 1 hour, so they get more out of it.
Sure.
But there's like this cognitive dissonance that, well, like, I'm super gritty because I'm working 60, 80 hours a week on my business, forgetting that, but you probably like it. You're getting something out of it. There's a dopamine hit in there as well.
Right.
And the true grit that we're trying to talk about is doing the things that are hard. Once you start enjoying it, it's not really necessarily hard anymore. Yeah, you want to find enjoyment in it and so forth. But we're also talking about the things that are truly hard, the things you don't want to do that are a little bit uncomfortable and going through the wall. And for some people, training is that. I think you and I, as we were discussing, we enjoy training probably more than most. Except when it gets really hard. If you push your limits, then it gets hard.
There are some things that I don't like to do.
Sure.
Like, you love to run. I don't.
I hate running.
Oh, yeah?
I do. I love how I feel after a run.
Yeah, I don't
I hate it though.
The beginning, the during, the after.
Yeah, but I do not like going for a run, especially the first couple kilometers before you get sort of like that second wind, if you will.
Yeah.
It's just, that's a grind. But I do like the challenge of it. It's,
Right.
and I think this is why a lot of executives run, because like there's so much self-talk that you're going through as you're running, because your brain's telling you, stop, why are we doing this? This is stupid. You don't need to be doing this. Do you know how hard you work today? If you put that hour towards something else in the business, you might get that promotion you're looking for,
Right.
or you might expand the business or whatever. And, I challenge that thinking because we often discount things like the value of, one, the grit you're building inside of you, the capacity that you might need to deploy later in your business. And if you're robbing yourself of the opportunity to go for a run, let's say in that example, and build on your capacity for that grit, that might actually be the thing that does more for your business long term than the fact that you're in the chair for an extra hour.
Right.
And so intentionally sitting with these things and actually thinking through them and challenging the stories you tell yourself, especially for executives and entrepreneurs, these are all really wonderful things that we can be doing. A good example of that is, and I forget this all the time too, conversely, is that like I forget, as I was saying, to sit with things and be a little more present sometimes. And that could actually serve me at times more than doing more. Because if I can just think about things a little more deeply, a little more thoughtfully, then there's a good chance that that's going to lead me towards a better decision, something new, something novel that, we could build into the business or whatever the case may be, rather than just work, doing the thing over and over again. And so it's sort of, the virtues can dress up in all these different ways. And I think that's where sitting with the things, sitting with these ideas, having the conversations, getting some help, whether it's friends, family, coaches, there's extreme value in that. Sometimes I see people scoff at the idea of having a coach as an adult or in a profession, but I don't know if there's anything more valuable in terms of the work that you're doing on yourself. And so anyways, I thought it would be important to kind of call that forward.
Yeah. The executive one is an interesting talking point because there's also a question of productive time doing the thing.
Yeah.
Recently, we were having a conversation about a 5-day, 8-hour day work week versus a 4-day, 10-hour day work week. I honestly don't know how much more work I'm going to get in a 10-hour day than I am an 8-hour day, as far as my ability to produce.
Sure.
In an 8-hour day, I can get a ton done. And if those 2 hours removed means I can train my body and be more vigorous and have more energy while I'm at work, then that's a different kind of trade-off.
Right.
But all to say, people have different capacities, and there is a lot of nuance in this also.
Yeah, totally. And, we always try and find a one-size-fits-all.
Yeah.
And it seems like everything we do. And I'm a huge proponent of the individuality. Team, yes, but within teams, there's also individuals. And I stress the importance of thinking for yourself, thinking about yourself, trying to understand yourself, and reflect and look deeper. And that's really at the core of the book, is self-exploration philosophically and understanding a bit about yourself. The bar graph that we've discussed a few times of like, okay, if I placed all of my virtues and characteristics, as infinite as they may be, if I was to intentionally select 20 of them and place them on a bar graph, where do I think I would kind of sit? If I look at whoever it is, or the person that demonstrates the most courage or the most grit that I know of in my life, or a character I've seen on television, some sort of like archetype, doesn't matter. and let's say I just make that the 100. Where do I kind of fall on that? And ask the questions, okay, it's showing up in my professional life.
Yeah.
Is it also showing up in my personal life, in my relationships with my spouse, my children, my extended family, my friends? And sometimes you can't do it everywhere, but then at least understand where that sacrifice is being made, where that trade-off exists.
Yeah.
In my life, in many ways, it's my friends that have taken a back seat. Fortunately, I have so many wonderful friendships where, we sort of have the opportunity when we can see each other, we see each other, and we can't. But there's always going to be an element where I deeply miss how close we could be and so forth. But I understand that there's a trade-off in order to do some of the other things that I'm trying to do. And as long as I'm okay with that, then I can make those conscious decisions to move towards that. And sometimes we make decisions without consciously thinking about them. We do them all the time. And I think the idea is more to try and think about them more consciously.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, I think it comes down to the things you want the most and what you're willing to do to get them and where concessions have to be made.
Right.
You could want a 10 out of 10 fulfilling social life, but you're willing to allow that to be a 6 out of 10 because you want this one to be a 10 out of 10 more.
Right. Yeah, I've seen Gary Vaynerchuk talk about that quite a lot, where he says, like, I have some of the happiest friends in the world that make $65,000 a year and are on like 4 or 5 baseball teams, go to all of their kids' games for everything, coach their kids, whatever. And they just love life.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful. That's what they want. And then other friends, he'll say, who basically are crying in a Ferrari every day after work. So they might have thought that they wanted that thing, that they could just persevere and white knuckle through.
Sure.
Kicking through that wall, realizing that the Ferrari on the other end was not the thing that they cared about. And now they're sort of stuck with this thing. Although I don't know that we're ever stuck. We have the opportunity to pivot and change our minds. And maybe that person that is crying in the Ferrari doesn't quite realize that or how to do that. But it is possible. But, long before you try and break down that brick wall that we've discussed so many times, it's taking the time to think about it. And, that's the value of taking the time. That's the value of presence and sort of sitting with things is, there's brick walls all around us. There's things that are going to be hard that we need to pursue.
Yeah.
And the more time we take to decide which ones we want to knock down and go through. Otherwise, we could just spend our whole life just completely blitzing through all of these walls and never really finding the one that has meaning for us.
Sure.
Conversely, it's a paradox. You could also sit there and never actually try and go through a wall.
Right.
And that's not good either.
Yep.
So there's that tension.
Yeah. The crying in the Ferrari piece kind of brings me back to the beginning with parents maybe goal setting or making decisions on behalf of their children, where of course they have to in many, many cases, and it changes depending on the age group. If your decisions are always being made for you, you might end up being the guy crying in the Ferrari because you never learned how to set goals for yourself.
Sure.
You're trying to execute on something that was set up for you. And conversely, I'm sure there are some dudes who are laughing hysterically in their Ferrari.
Of course.
Loving life.
Of course.
But that's the duality of man.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's so beautifully put. And I think that's the interesting part too is, as a parent, you're kind of doing this twice. You're trying to do the thinking for yourself and some of the pre-thinking for your children as they're growing. So the more we can kind of get things right within ourselves, the more we can apply and give to them. And sort of that's kind of leadership in a nutshell. It begins with you. And the question for leaders is like, well, who are you that someone should follow you? And so I think that's an important question to ask. And it's an important one to ask as a parent. And if you don't feel strongly about that, that's the beautiful moment to take action, make some changes, and start thinking so thoughtfully about yourself to becoming that person that they're going to want to follow and they're going to want to listen to, because you're doing the things, and that's going to give you the space and the capacity to be more thoughtful about how to help raise them more, without most of your capacity being sort of wasted on work or the commute or your own challenges. So you have to build your capacity not just for yourself but also for them.
Yeah, I felt like I had a little bit more to say about the 8-hour versus the 10-hour
Sure.
arrangement. But I would be reaching to pull out what I think I was going to say. I didn't make any notes, and I should have, because I felt like I had something interesting there. But
well, if we can kind of workshop it a little bit, and maybe it's worth something, or we can cut it. But the 10-hour versus 8-hour thing has, there's so many. I think there's so many layers in it. There's the productivity side, which I completely agree with, because there's a point of diminishing returns on the work side. A lot of us want to pretend that sort of the act of being in the chair, we're not line workers anymore, but like a lot of the lessons like the KPIs we measure is like line worker type KPIs. Like, well, the person that's on the line the longest is the hardest working.
right,
Just they're doing a mechanical thing, picking up the box, putting it over here, whatever the line is.
right,
But a lot of work today is thoughtful work. You have to think and reason and do all those things. And there's like cognitive capacity that we kind of run into limitations.
sure,
And this is one of the hard things as an employer is you kind of want to, one, you have to paint a picture almost for everybody in most cases, or at least departments, to make things fair and equal, and that makes sense. But what you can account for also is, maybe 4 out of the 5 people in that group have the capacity to do a 10. The other doesn't. They can only do an 8.
right,
But the other 4 get more value out of the 10. And so now you have diminishing returns on somebody.
yeah,
Or maybe they're going through a point, something in their life where that's consuming a lot of their cognitive capacity.
yeah,
And then so they have very little to bring to work, and maybe it would benefit from a shorter amount of time working, where they could be productive and they could sort of lock in for a couple hours and get a lot done, knowing that they could then turn their focus to the other things that might be going on in their life that genuinely require their attention. Within the human condition, there's just so many things to unpack. And again, it's back to the one size fits all that we always have to apply, including jobs and roles and things like that. So it's quite hard. And, on the business side, you want to try and provide as much value to the people who work for you as you possibly can.
yeah,
And how everyone receives value is also different. For some people, it's just strictly transactional, monetary transaction. That's it. For others, it's about preparing for their future with, pension and investments or things like that. For others, it's striving towards some level of promotion and helping them figure out what that is, and then how to get there and mapping that for them and helping them understand that. So anyways, there's so many things within the 4 to 8.
yeah.
But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah. Popped back into my brain, thankfully.
Good.
And it was just the idea of small goals or functions that you have to fulfill, which you can consider executing on that being a goal within the broader scope of the journey towards a large goal. And how it pertains to grittiness and quitting. So, for instance, I may really love work and enjoy the process, but there are tasks within that I hate. And I still have to persevere through those. So even though I'm working within a framework of something that on the whole is a net positive and I enjoy doing, you can really enjoy what you're doing. So for me, like weightlifting, you get to a point where it's no longer, the pursuit is no longer a gritty one.
Right.
But there are things within that are component parts.
Right.
So again, pulling back to my nutrition, that is an element of reaching my fitness goal. Some people would say it's 80% of like the effective effort towards reaching that goal. I don't know what the genuine percentage actually is, but there can be parts that do require a sufficient level of grit to get through, even though the broader scope is something that broadly doesn't.
It sounds like what you're describing is like, I know a lot of athletes will go through this. Like you can love the sport and hate a lot of your training sessions.
Yeah.
Like you love to play the game. You love to perform the skills that you have, but the grit and resilience required to build the skill sometimes sucks, right? Like I loved soccer growing up. I gave so much for it. I made so many sacrifices, and the grit sometimes showed up where even though I loved having a ball at my feet, I didn't want to say no to going to this family event and then go to practice, but that's what was necessary.
Right.
So there's so many things that I loved within it, but the actual act of doing it in that moment was, I hated.
Right.
And so, I had to deploy the grit. And we get later on, we'll have the episode about this, and this is in the book, but it's sort of like selecting the right tool at the right time for the right job.
Yeah.
And that's also going to be part of it. And it's good. And that's where more of the self-reflection and thinking comes in, is like, being very tactical. All right, I don't need grit for this training session because we're just doing an inter squad game.
Yeah.
Sweet. Like that's just going to be fun. Next training session where we're doing some fitness assessment and testing, I need some grit, not just to do the thing, but then I'm going to need some grit to receive that feedback.
Right.
Because I'm going to have to receive it for whatever it is. Maybe it's not good. Maybe hold my tongue, say nothing, and then deploy the grit. If it wasn't good feedback, deploy the grit to put in the work necessary so the next time we have that session, I've demonstrated a level of improvement. But everything in between that, all the games we're playing, all the time where I'm having fun with the ball at my feet, with my friends, when we're hanging out and all that kind of stuff, then it's fun.
Right.
And so, yeah, everything is interwoven to one another in a very complex way. And it's hard to surgically find the thing. Yeah. And it's going to show up different for all of us.
Sure.
When to deploy the grit. If I tie that back to the work one,
yeah,
I think there's a huge element there where, you can find satisfaction, meaning, and purpose within your job, but that doesn't mean everything about your job you love.
Right.
But that in order to be good at your job, which you might really want to do, you're going to have to do things that you don't want to do. And that's where the grit can come in as well.
Yeah. But I think one of the things I was trying to articulate, but I didn't do a very good job, is that we already made a distinction between grit and effort, and then outcomes. So again, like we were talking about time behind the chair. If I were asked to put in 10 versus 8, and we can talk about strategic quitting, for example. If I know that there's diminishing returns after a certain point, it's not grittiness to sit there and try to work that additional 2 hours.
Totally.
If I know that it's a matter of, to tie it back into a fitness example, it's volume and recovery as well.
Yeah.
So if I'm burning myself out to try to get a marginal return when resting will allow me to put out an optimal level during the time that I can actually spend productively. And then another layer there that I wanted to bring up was that there are processes and procedures and sequences and loops in the majority of people's day-to-day in their job. Unless you're somebody who's working on unique projects where the subject matter is different every day. But there's also going to be some level of looping procedure where there's a sequence that you follow. if I sit down at a desk and I can follow my sequence loop 40 times in 8 hours, and someone can only do it 30 times in 10 hours,
Yes.
that's also a worthy consideration.
Yeah, and you and I have talked about this, in actual work, and something to think about. And it's something I'm a huge proponent of. It's, what are you measuring in business? Are you measuring time and share, or are you measuring productivity?
Yeah.
Oftentimes we get stuck on time and share. I think that's probably more broadly within society. It's what we've been conditioned to, I think, in many ways. It's because it's easy to see. So there's like a bit of an intellectual laziness about that. We're like, obviously James is sitting there for 10 hours, therefore James is this. I don't need to look any further.
Right, there are inferences that people make based on that.
Totally. I don't need to unpack anything else. I know all. My eyes have seen this. And that can be the furthest thing from the truth.
Right.
And so there's certainly an intellectual laziness that could come from not being present and thinking thoughtfully and taking the time to slow down and all of that. And for some people, like I said, you need grit to do that, myself included. And they just gloss over things way too quickly, either because they're lazy or they think that's more important, whatever the case may be. But there's something really important inside of that where, productivity does matter. It deeply matters towards any objective.
Yeah.
And efficiency. Efficiency also is what can help increase capacity. So what was your example again? You could do in 8 hours, was it 40 loops? Someone takes 30,
let's call it 40.
30 and 10. Well, your 40, if that continues to either increase, or we say we only need 30 loops, but you can do 40 and 8. Well, let's just dial that back to 30, and now James has more capacity. Like, obviously that's sort of like a discussion with your employer and so forth. It'd be like, okay, well, what does that mean if my capacity is increasing? And that's sort of like contractual negotiations. But that's how you can also provide more value for the employer, and they can receive more value and give more value. And it means there's opportunities for the business to grow and expand as that capacity increases. So the thing that we need to, in all things, business especially, we need to try and find the things that matter most and then make those the things we measure. Because everybody downstream from that, they'll start to put their value in the thing that's being measured. Right? Is it Charlie Munger that says, show me the incentive, I'll show you the outcome? And so like if the incentive is just like be in your chair for 10 hours, and that's the thing that's measured, that's the thing we value, even if it's not measured, if that's sort of like the cultural thing that everyone sort of celebrates, then that's the thing that matters. Whether it's the thing you're measuring or not. So you have to pay attention to all of those things. Not just in business, but in our own lives. What are the things we intentionally celebrate?
Sure. And, between business and our own goals, I would also caution against grit for the sake of it also. Even though it can be a tremendous thing to leverage, it's also worth looking, can I find an efficiency here? If this is taking up a significant amount of my brain power, there's so many things that we juggle in our day-to-day, be it our personal or business life. So again, like if I'm the guy who needs 10 hours to do that thing, but I take pride in my work because, I put in 10 hours today, I got it all done kind of thing. Like, think about how much more you could get done if you take the ego element out of it. Be like, am I doing this hard thing just because it's hard and I take pride in being the guy who does hard things?
Right.
Is it a harder thing to recognize that you're doing that and then actually find a solution for it? That could, in its own way, potentially be grit, unless I'm framing it incorrectly.
No, absolutely. I think it is.
So sometimes white knuckling can be necessary in a moment.
Yeah.
But broadly, and to pull it back to transferable everything, we always need to be analyzing and reflecting and reassessing, and we shouldn't be changing our goals flippantly, but certainly if you can find a better way to reach that goal, it would be a disservice not to.
Totally. we can't be fickle
Sure.
with what our goals are and how often we change them. It kind of brings things a little bit full circle to the whole point of transferable everything. And it's the idea, even though we've talked about so many different, like we've unpacked so much of grit and different forms of grit, how it shows up. We've got like the moments, the longer periods, different parts of our lives, different positions and roles within our lives. The point of transferable everything is that once you understand grit as a virtue within yourself and you've practiced it in one domain, whether it's athletics at the beginning, that should give you the evidence that you have grit as a capacity. And whether you have to deploy grit in athletics or in your profession, in your personal life, in your parenting, once you've deployed grit and you've done it, then you have it. It exists within you. So the grit you demonstrate on the soccer field is still the same grit that you're going to need as a parent, a professional, whatever, project manager, whatever the case may be, in your relationships, in your personal life. Grit is grit. Just like attention to detail is and always will be. Grit is still grit. As long as you know how to be selective to say, well, this is my goal. Doesn't matter if the goal is professional, athletic, personal. The goal is the goal. These are the things necessary. These are the conditions, the variables that are necessary for me to achieve it. They will be hard. I will need to transcend them and win and overcome whatever is necessary, white knuckle through them. But I'm aiming towards the thing. You've got grit. And I think for me, there's an element of self-belief that can come from that. It doesn't necessarily have to be confidence, because maybe you don't know, I had grit as a soccer player. Now I'm a parent. I haven't really been there. It's a new domain. I'm not overly confident just yet, but I know it's going to require some grit. I can have some belief that as I step into that space, I have evidence that I can deploy grit and it's going to be necessary. And through that, then comes the confidence on the other end.
Sure.
We get into all of those things downstream, but I just kind of wanted to highlight and sort of bring full circle that once you have grit, it's yours.
Right.
It doesn't belong to any domain. It's James's. It's Daniel's. I've got grit. I've done it. I've smashed through walls. I've been there. I understand what it takes within me. It's just a different wall.
Right.
It's a wall nonetheless.
If I had to add anything on to your last point,
Yeah, please.
it would be that to cap it off, as we almost always do, there's going to be other virtues at play.
Yeah.
In that, yes, I've demonstrated grit. I know I have it. It's a tool in my toolbox. But first, I need to deploy other virtues like humility in a new environment in order to recognize and learn when I can eventually stack evidence to the point where I can stack the habit of deploying grit in that sphere.
Yeah. I think, James, you ended that perfectly. And I just want to thank everyone again for listening to our podcast, for being so thoughtful, for thinking deeply and going on the journey with us to explore and to put our ideas into the world. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you. If you can, please like and subscribe. It matters more than you know. And hope you listen to our next one. Thank you.